The 1960s gave us cinematic giants, lavish productions with towering sets, legendary stars, and studio budgets that could sink a battleship. Yet some of these can't-miss blockbusters vanished almost overnight, erased from the public memory. How did films that once ruled marquees disappear into history's shadows? Let's rediscover 15 massive 1960s movies the world forgot. 1. The Fall of the Roman Empire, 1964. When Samuel Bronston set out to recreate the grandeur of ancient Rome, he did it on a scale that defied belief. The Fall of the Roman Empire was filmed in Spain with a colossal set, the largest Roman forum ever constructed for a movie. Starring Sophia Loren, Stephen Boyd, and Christopher Plummer as a cunning commodus, the film offered sweeping battle sequences, political intrigue, and a lavish score by Dmitri Tiomkin. At the time, the production was hailed as a technical marvel. Yet behind the spectacle, disaster loomed. The film was released into a changing cinematic landscape where audience tastes were shifting from epics to grittier, more personal stories. Critics found it cold, calling it a spectacle without a soul. Its box office failure contributed to the bankruptcy of Bronston's production empire, and despite its influence on later films like Gladiator, it was quickly eclipsed by Ben-Hur and other better-remembered historical dramas. Today, only film historians speak of its staggering sets, most of which were torn down after filming. The Roman Forum, once the largest movie set in history, now exists only in faded behind-the-scenes photographs. 2. Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, 1965. A madcap aerial comedy filled with daring stunts and a globe-spanning cast. Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines seemed destined for eternal charm. Its premise, a 1910 air race from London to Paris, allowed for slapstick comedy, daring aviation sequences, and a whimsical tone that captivated audiences. The production spared no expense, building dozens of authentic-looking early aircraft for the stunts. Upon release, it was a box office hit, pulling in international audiences with its color, humor, and high-flying antics. But its comedic style, rooted in broad caricatures and lengthy running time, aged quickly in the era of faster, grittier films. As the 70s brought sharper satire and more grounded comedies, this sprawling farce felt like a relic. Despite being nominated for multiple Oscars, including Best Original Screenplay, its cultural footprint evaporated. The film's surviving replica planes now sit in museums, quietly gathering dust. A fitting metaphor for a movie that once soared and then, just as quickly, disappeared from the skies of popular memory. 3. Khartoum, 1966. Epic in scope and noble in ambition, Khartoum told the story of the 1884 siege in Sudan, with Charlton Heston as British General Charles Gordon and Laurence Olivier controversially cast as the Mahdi. The sweeping desert cinematography, filmed in ultra-wide formats, gave it the visual gravitas of Lawrence of Arabia, but without that film's tight narrative and emotional pull. Critics praised its grandeur, but criticized its pacing, which often felt more like a history lesson than an adventure. While it was a moderate success at the box office, it lacked the staying power to compete with the sharper political thrillers and action films emerging at the time. Today, Khartoum is mostly remembered, when it's remembered at all, for Olivier's unsettling use of makeup to portray an African leader, a choice that now overshadows the film's production achievements. Its once praised battle sequences, with hundreds of extras and real camels charging across the Sudanese landscape, are rarely discussed in modern retrospectives. 4. The Agony and the Ecstasy, 1965. a prestige project about Renaissance genius Michelangelo, the Agony and the Ecstasy paired Charlton Heston with Rex Harrison as Pope Julius II. Adapted from Irving Stone's novel, it chronicled the struggles, rivalries, and obsessive artistry behind the Sistine Chapel ceiling. The sets, painted recreations, and rich score were all top tier. Critics admired the craft but found the storytelling overly reverent and slow. Audiences, expecting the sweeping thrills of Ben-Hur or El Cid, instead got extended debates about art, faith, and politics. It was nominated for 5 Oscars but won none, and over time it became a footnote in Heston's career. While art historians occasionally reference it for its attention to historical detail, most moviegoers have never heard of it. Ironically, a film about the creation of one of the most enduring works of art in history couldn't create a legacy of its own. 5. Dr. Doolittle, 1967. On paper, Dr. Doolittle had everything. Rex Harrison in the title role, whimsical animals, a family-friendly story, and a lavish production budget. 20th Century Fox envisioned it as their next Mary Poppins, pouring millions into elaborate sets, exotic animal rentals, and an aggressive marketing campaign. The reality was far less magical. Harrison's difficult on-set behavior, combined with the logistical nightmare of working with dozens of live animals, pushed production over schedule and budget. Critics found it bloated and aimless, despite its Oscar-winning song, "Talk to the Animals." The film performed poorly in theaters, and Fox's financial losses nearly crippled the studio, ironically leading them to gamble on a little sci-fi project called Star Wars a decade later. Today, Dr. Doolittle survives mostly as trivia, a cautionary tale of when too much money, too many animals, and too little charm collide. 6. The Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965. When George Stevens set out to film The Greatest Story Ever Told, he envisioned nothing less than the definitive cinematic telling of the life of Jesus. With an all-star cast, Max von Sydow as Christ, Charlton Heston as John the Baptist, and cameos from dozens of Hollywood legends, the production was meant to be both reverent and monumental. Filmed over 5 years in locations across Utah, Arizona, and California, the cinematography aimed to evoke Renaissance paintings brought to life. The budget ballooned to over $20 million, astronomical for the mid-1960s, and the running time stretched past 4 hours in its original cut. Stevens insisted on grand, slow-moving scenes that lingered on landscapes and faces, creating a stately, almost meditative pace. While some critics admired the artistry, many audiences found it exhausting. Compounding the problem was the stunt casting. Familiar Hollywood faces like John Wayne delivering lines such as, "Truly this man was the Son of God," pulled many viewers out of the sacred mood. The film opened to massive promotion, but middling box office returns, failing to recoup its colossal budget. Over time, The Greatest Story Ever Told became a cautionary tale about ambition outpacing audience appetite. Biblical epics like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments retained their classic status, but this one quietly slipped into the background. Today, it's remembered mainly by film historians and occasionally screened on Easter television, a faded relic of when Hollywood believed sheer size equaled immortality. 7. Paint Your Wagon, 1969. A Western musical starring Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin should have been a box office goldmine, especially when adapted from a hit Broadway show. Paramount poured millions into Paint Your Wagon, filming in remote mountain locations with elaborate sets and sweeping cinematography. The idea was to merge the rugged appeal of Westerns with the crowd-pleasing charm of musicals. Instead, the film ran into trouble from the start. Neither Eastwood nor Marvin were trained singers, and Marvin's gruff, drunken rendition of Wand'rin' Star became infamous. Production delays, bad weather, and on-location partying ballooned costs to nearly triple the original budget. When it hit theaters, audiences were bewildered. Was it a romance, a comedy, a western, a musical? The tonal confusion, combined with a bloated 164-minute runtime, alienated critics and the public alike. While it earned a profit thanks to international markets, it quickly faded from pop culture conversation. In the decades since, Paint Your Wagon has mostly been reduced to a punchline, brought up in lists of weirdest Clint Eastwood roles, or musicals that never should have happened. Yet for a brief moment, it was one of Paramount's biggest productions, only to vanish into the dusty trails of Hollywood history. 8th Hawaii, 1966. Based on James Michener's sweeping novel, Hawaii was an ambitious MGM production starring Julie Andrews and Max von Sydow. The film charted the arrival of missionaries to the islands in the 19th century and the ensuing cultural clashes with the native population. Director George Roy Hill aimed for both grandeur and historical weight, capturing stunning location photography in Hawaii, alongside elaborate period costumes and sets. The production was plagued by logistical headaches, remote filming locations, unpredictable weather, and tensions among the cast. Despite these challenges, Hawaii was a box office success upon release, even earning multiple Oscar nominations. Yet the film's success was short-lived. Its lengthy runtime and heavy-handed moralizing didn't invite repeated viewings, and by the 1970s, it was rarely shown on television. The cultural shift toward more contemporary, socially conscious films also made Hawaii feel like a relic of the studio system's past. Today, it's overshadowed by the enduring fame of Julie Andrews' other 1960s hits like The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins. While it once stood as one of MGM's proudest achievements, Hawaii now lingers mostly in obscurity, its sweeping vistas remembered only by devoted fans of epic historical dramas. 9. Ice Station Zebra, 1968. In the late 60s, Cold War thrillers were hot box office commodities, and Ice Station Zebra had all the makings of a hit: espionage, nuclear tension, and Arctic adventure. Adapted from Alistair MacLean's novel, the film starred Rock Hudson, Ernest Borgnine, and Patrick McGoohan, and was filmed in 70mm Ultra Panavision for maximum spectacle. The plot centered on an American submarine racing to a drifting Arctic weather station, secretly a front for recovering a spy satellite. Filmed on elaborate submarine sets and icy soundstage recreations, it delivered big-screen grandeur. Upon release, Ice Station Zebra did modest business and became a minor cult favorite in later years, thanks in part to frequent TV airings. Yet it never achieved the classic status of other Cold War thrillers like The Hunt for Red October. Critics pointed to its uneven pacing, stiff performances, and a lack of emotional stakes. Despite its technical polish and atmospheric tension, it faded from the cultural memory, living on mainly through its connection to Howard Hughes, who reportedly screened it dozens of times in his private Las Vegas hotel suite. For most moviegoers, however, it remains a forgotten iceberg in Hollywood, sea of Cold War cinema. 10. The Sand Pebbles, 1966. Robert Wise's The Sand Pebbles starred Steve McQueen in one of his most intense dramatic roles. Set in the 1920s China, it followed a U.S. Navy gunboat crew caught in political turmoil and personal conflicts. The film was meticulously crafted, with location shooting in Taiwan and massive set pieces depicting tense river patrols. McQueen's performance earned him his only Oscar nomination, and the film received 8 nominations overall, including Best Picture. Upon release, it was praised for its realism and moral complexity, drawing strong box office returns. However, the film's deliberate pacing and morally ambiguous ending limited its long-term appeal in a market that soon shifted toward faster, grittier war films. While respected among cinephiles, it didn't maintain a hold on mainstream audiences, especially as McQueen's later hits overshadowed it. Today, The Sand Pebbles is more often cited in Oscar trivia than in lists of great war films. It remains a powerful, well-made movie, but one that slipped quietly into the river of forgotten Hollywood epics. 11. Finian's Rainbow, 1968. Francis Ford Coppola's early venture into big-budget filmmaking, Finian's Rainbow was a lavish adaptation of the popular 1947 Broadway musical. Starring Fred Astaire, then in his late 60s, in his final full musical role, alongside newcomer Petula Clark, the film blended whimsical fantasy with social commentary. The story followed an Irishman and his daughter arriving in the American South with a stolen pot of gold, inadvertently unleashing magical chaos and exposing racial tensions. Warner Brothers poured money into lush Technicolor cinematography and large-scale musical numbers, hoping to ride the wave of The Sound of Music's success. But the cultural timing was off. By 1968, audiences were turning toward edgier, more socially conscious films like The Graduate and Bonnie and Clyde. The film's old-fashioned sentiment, cartoonish racial stereotypes, and stagey production style felt outdated to a generation seeking realism. Critics were divided. Some admired its earnestness and Coppola's fledgling directorial flourishes, while others found it saccharine and overly long. At the box office, it performed modestly, but failed to become the family classic the studio envisioned. For Fred Astaire, it marked a bittersweet farewell to musicals, yet the film quickly drifted out of public view. Today, Finian's Rainbow is mostly remembered by musical theater historians and Coppola completists, a transitional project that revealed both the fading of Hollywood's golden age musicals and the uncertain emergence of new Hollywood. 12. Camelot, 1967. With Richard Harris as King Arthur, Vanessa Redgrave as Guinevere, and Franco Nero as Lancelot, Camelot brought the beloved Lerner and Loewe Broadway musical to the big screen in grand style. Warner Brothers spared no expense, constructing ornate castle sets in Spain and dressing the production with lavish medieval costumes. The marketing promised romance, grandeur, and unforgettable music. While the film won 3 Oscars, including Best Costume Design, it was burdened by a sluggish pace and uneven performances. Richard Harris's booming delivery divided audiences, and some critics found the chemistry between the leads lacking. The lengthy runtime, over 3 hours, also limited repeat business. Released during a cultural shift toward grittier, more experimental cinema, Camelot felt like a relic from another era. Despite its initial box office draw, it failed to achieve the lasting musical legacy of My Fair Lady or The Sound of Music. In the years since, Camelot has become more of a nostalgic curiosity than a go-to classic. Its songs endure on cast recordings, and the stage version still finds new life, but the film itself remains a faded jewel, grand in ambition, yet strangely hollow in the court of cinematic memory. 13. Ryan's Daughter, 1970. Though technically released in 1970, Ryan's Daughter belongs stylistically and thematically to the sprawling epics of the 1960s. Directed by David Lean, fresh off Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, it was expected to be another masterpiece. Set on the Irish coast during World War I, it told the story of a young woman's scandalous affair with a British officer, sparking social upheaval in her small village. Lean used 65mm film to capture sweeping seascapes and rugged cliffs, with cinematography that remains breathtaking to this day. The production was massive, involving entire villages built for the shoot, and hundreds of extras for storm and mob scenes. Yet critics were unforgiving. They found the story slow, melodramatic, and unworthy of Lean's epic style. Its 3-hour-plus runtime alienated audiences, and its critical drubbing wounded Lean so deeply that he wouldn't direct another film for 14 years. While it won Oscars for Best Cinematography and Best Supporting Actor, Ryan's Daughter quickly disappeared from popular conversation. Today, it's remembered mainly by Lean enthusiasts and cinematography buffs, a gorgeous, costly reminder that even the greatest directors can misjudge the public mood. 14. Tobruk, 1967. In the midst of a decade dominated by historical epics, Tobruk was Universal's attempt to capture the gritty heroics of World War II. Starring Rock Hudson and George Peppard, the film depicted a daring Allied commando raid to destroy German fuel supplies in the North African desert. Filmed in rugged desert locations and enhanced with practical explosions, the production exuded large-scale authenticity. The marketing promised a tense, action-packed war drama. Audiences turned out in reasonable numbers, but the film lacked the emotional depth of The Guns of Navarone or the intensity of Where Eagles Dare. Critics considered it solid but unremarkable, competent entertainment that didn't linger in the mind. Over the years, Tobruk found a second life as a staple of weekend television war movie marathons in the 70s and 80s, but it never became a defining title of the genre. Today, it's largely absent from discussions of classic war films, overshadowed by more iconic entries. Its practical battle effects remain impressive, but its place in cinematic memory is as fleeting as desert sand carried away by the wind. 15. Darling Lili, 1970. Another end-of-an-era production that began in the 60s, Darling Lili starred Julie Andrews as a glamorous World War I entertainer who is secretly a German spy. Directed by Blake Edwards, it combined romance, espionage, and musical numbers, an ambitious blend that required enormous sets, aerial battle sequences, and elaborate period costumes. Paramount banked heavily on Andrews' star power, but the troubled production went over budget, reportedly costing more than $25 million. Weather delays, rewrites, and creative disagreements between Edwards and the studio dragged out filming, while Andrews' wholesome image clashed with the film's attempt at a more sultry, mysterious tone. When it finally premiered, critics were lukewarm, finding it too long, too muddled, and unable to decide whether it was a spy thriller or a musical romance. Despite Oscar nominations for its costumes and song, it flopped at the box office, becoming one of the decade's most expensive disappointments. Today, Darling Lili is more a case study in Hollywood overreach than a remembered classic. For Andrews, it marked a turning point, signaling the end of her dominance in the musical genre. For the industry, it was another warning that the grandiose spectacle of the 60s was giving way to a leaner, riskier era of filmmaking. These films were built on dreams, budgets, and reputations big enough to seem immortal. Yet history can be cruel, leaving even the grandest productions to fade into obscurity. Which of these forgotten epics do you remember? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation.